open up. Could you give me screen sharing rights?
Yes, madam. Screen sharing rights is there, madam. Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Just
Good
a minute.
morning.
I'm not able to, I don't see the screen right now.
Okay, madam.
Um,
Launch the screen, madam. You launched. I think it has been already launched. Okay, madam. This is the one.
can you see it or you can't see it?
Yes, madam. We can see, madam. We can see.
You can see my screen.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So you
Yes,
can
madam.
see a slide saying elements of a research design, right?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yes, madam. One second, madam. One second, madam. Heartily
Yeah,
welcome
no
to
problem. Take your time.
Professor Isha Ray, madam. She is our resource person, today's resource person, madam. Heartily welcome to you, madam. Isha
Thank you.
Ray is a professor at Energy and Resource Group. She has a BA in philosophy, politics, and economics from Oxford University and a PhD in applied economics from Stanford University. Dr. Ray's research interests are water and development, sanitation and development, and technology and society. Her research projects focus on access to safe and affordable water and sanitation for rural and urban poor, and on the role of technology in advancing sustainable development and social equity. She teaches courses on social science research methods, water and development, and community driven development. She and her students have worked with low income communities and access to water, sanitation, energy, and information technology in India, China, Turkey, Mexico, Tanzania, and California's Central Valley. Dr. Ray served on editorial committees of annual review of environmental and resources from 2003 to 2013, is currently a reviewer of 15 peer-reviewed journals and frequently serves as an expert group advisor to United Nations Women and UNESCO. This is the brief about Professor Isha Rai, madam. Once again, heartily welcome to you, madam. Now,
Thank you so much.
thank
Thank
you.
you, Dr. Hannah Godinath and everybody else. Is this a good time for me to begin now?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Please.
All right. So what I had talked about, Dr. Narayana Billava and I are very long-term colleagues for many years. And what I had discussed with him, discussing with you today, with this audience, is I know that you have done a lot of work together on methods and different forms of data collection and technologies of data collection and so on. Today, what I want to discuss is something much more broad-based with respect to research design. So Dr. Bilava had told me to go for about 2 hours. Is that about right?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Please.
Okay, so we'll do a break in the middle so it doesn't get too overwhelming.
Yes, yes, madam. Yes,
Yeah, everyone can hear? Everyone can hear, right?
yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to call my lecture today Elements of a Research Design. And what I mean by elements of a research design is how do we use the data that we collect, whether it is primary data or it is secondary data or other sources of data, how do we use the data that we collect as part of a broader research question or a research project, okay? That's the goal of what I'm trying to discuss today. How do we put together a good research project or a good research design or a good research paper, and where do methods and data collection fit in to that broader research design? I would like to request the audience, sometimes I tend to talk a little bit too fast. And if I'm talking a little fast, just let me know and I'll slow it up. Okay. So that's the broad discussion. So today we want to talk about, I know you've done, this is mainly a methods workshop. So what is the connection between methods and what I'm calling research design? So you use your methods to design your proposal or your project or the outline of your paper, and you have data collection so that you can match your research question to the appropriate strategies and data. And we're going to be talking about strategies and data later on in this lecture. So if it's not completely clear right this moment, it will be clearer as I proceed. But the point I'm trying to make is we use our methods in order to support our research proposal and our research design. We use specific data collection methods so that we can match our research question to the right strategies and the right data, and thus to make your argument. We also need to think about methods and data collection, because just as we are using it to develop a strong research design ourselves, we also have to understand the menu of methods and the way research designs are put together, because we're evaluating other researchers' analysis also. So for example, when you are doing your own research project and your own research questions, one of the things that we have to look at is the literature review, right? We have to look at the other papers and the other projects that have already been done in our broad field of inquiry. Well, we have to evaluate those also, because, for example, some papers are excellent, really well written, excellent research design, and those are the ones that we want to use, and those are the ones that we want to cite. Some research papers are not very good. They are not very strong. And so there's no point citing those to support our research project, because they're not strong papers. So we want to understand how a research design is put together so that we can best appreciate not only how we should write our paper and organize our project, but also how we should evaluate other people's analyses and other people's projects to see if they are useful for us. The next reason, the other reason that we need to match methods to our research design, is because since no method is perfect and since no research design is perfect, all of our research projects will have strengths, certain things it does really well, certain questions it's been able to answer really well, and it will also have limitations, something that our method or our data or our way of asking questions did not explain. And so we owe it to the reader to also be honest about what it is that we have done and been able to contribute, and what we have not been able to do. And this we are going to call the limitation of our work. So methods are connected to research design in all these ways. One, designing your own proposal and paper. Two, evaluating other people's proposals and paper. Three, understanding the strengths and limitations of your work. Okay? I'm going to periodically stop, since I cannot see the audience. I'm going to periodically stop and ask if there are any questions thus far. And if there are, please feel free to interrupt. We have plenty of time today. Are there any questions thus far?
No, madam. No, madam.
All right. I'm going to stop like this, Dr. Hanagodimath, because I can't actually see anybody. So I'm just going to ask, okay? And you can please help me out here. Okay, so the thing that I said here in this slide was your methods and your research design are to be appropriately matched so that you can make your argument. Let me explain, what do I mean by making your argument? See, what are we collecting data for? What is the purpose of learning all these different ways of collecting data, survey methods, ODK, other ways of collecting data, Google Earth Engine, so many ways in which we can have data in the modern world. But what's the point? What are we collecting the data for? We are collecting the data in a systematic manner because we want to tell a story about the world. Okay? When Dr. Bilava and I worked together with our teams, we wanted to tell a story about 24/7 water versus intermittent water. That's why we needed our data. You want to say something, explain to the reader something about the world that is important and interesting from a social perspective. But the social world is a very complex world with a lot of messy data. It's just inherently a complex world. It's not like a lab experiment where we are controlling for everything. We're not able to control our subjects and our people in the complex social world. Okay? Still, with these messy data, we have to tell a story, knowing that it is messy and knowing that there are going to be gaps and holes that are not possible to fully explain. And we have to tell this story in a way that is convincing, it is logical, it is using our evidence in the right way, and we are collecting that evidence in a systematic manner so that the reader of our paper is convinced, yes, I think they did the best data they could, they used the best methods they could, they made the research design the strongest possible in the messy world that they are working in. And telling that story in a evidence-based, logical, and compelling way, knowing that it will not be perfect, but telling that story that is good enough is what I am calling making an argument, because we're using our data and our methods. And this is the part that I'm calling the research design, the use of data and methods within a logical research design allows us to make an argument, which is a claim or a statement or something in the social world that is important to us and that is not obvious. A good research design's job is to help you to tell that story. Now, how do I put together a research design? What are its pieces? So a research design is a complex process. So what are its constituent parts? Okay, what do I have to have in order to have a good research design? So the most simple things first, a research design always starts with a research topic or a problem. So I would like to ask a member of the audience to please volunteer and give me an example of what you think is a research topic or a problem.
The research topic means ones who able to looking for the various perspectives, maybe cause and effect, all those things, madam.
Now, a research topic, if I ask you, what is your research topic? Tell me one
My
sentence.
research topic means we able to define or we able to collect the information from the societies, madam, or we will give the proper solution to the societies.
But about what? What is your topic? If I tell you who's speaking, I
So
can't actually see.
it's
Okay.
women empowerment through self-help groups. That is my research topic.
Excellent. Excellent. That is a research topic. Women's empowerment through?
Self-help groups. Self-help
Perfect.
groups.
Women, I know what self-help groups are. Thank you. Women's, like Mairada and other groups like this, right? Okay, so women's empowerment and self-help groups. That is a research topic. Like, okay, whoever was speaking, this gentleman, he is passionate about research problem of topic of the theme that he is passionate about is women's empowerment and self-help groups. Great. Now, sir, women's empowerment and self-help groups is a huge topic, right?
Yes, madam.
Why
Yes.
one dissertation? You can write 100 dissertations on that topic, right? So what we are going to do is that's a starting point, but now I have to bring down my research problem to a specific question that I want to ask that is in the family of women's empowerment and self-help groups, but is now a specific question around which I will collect data. Okay, give me an example of a research question on the topic of women's empowerment and self-help groups. Give me a question which is an example.
Maybe we understand the socio-economic factors, madam. The
What
what
do you mean
level,
by that? Can you explain?
the what level the self-help groups have a socio-economic backgrounds.
Impact on socioeconomic growth.
Impact, madam.
Impact on.
Okay, so you're asking, what impact does self-help group have on women's empowerment and their socioeconomic background?
Yes,
Conditions.
madam.
Yes? Okay,
Yes,
that is a question. There are three kinds of social science questions that we can ask. There are questions that are like, what is? That was the example you gave me, right? So your question was, what impact do self-help groups have on women's empowerment and socioeconomic status? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes,
Now,
madam. Yes.
you could have also asked, I'm not saying you should, I'm giving examples of different kinds of questions. You could have said, how do membership in self-help groups impact women's empowerment and socioeconomic status? The first question is there an effect? The second question is, in what way do I see this effect? Through what mechanism? What is the causal chain that causes the effect? Which is a different kind of question. It's asking a how question, right? You can also ask a why question. Why do we need self-help groups in order for women to have empowerment and higher socioeconomic status? That question we will answer by explaining what are the kind of constraints and circumstances in which women have to live and work such that they need the mechanism of the self-help group in order to improve themselves. Is that completely clear?
Yes.
These are three different classes of question, which three different types of methods, but you are towards the same research theme or a same research topic. Yeah?
Yes, madam. Yes.
Okay, good. So now you've established your research question. And we're going to go with the research question that the gentleman raised. What is the impact of self-help groups on women's empowerment and socioeconomic status? Okay, let's go with that. I wanted to show you that there are different ways in which you can answer this question, but we're going to go with the what question. Sometimes people don't have a research question. Sometimes a research design is written like objectives. My objective is to explain how self-help groups impact women's empowerment or socioeconomic status. Or my objective is to understand whether self-help groups impact women's empowerment and socioeconomic status. It is the same thing. The same question can be asked like a question or like an objective. And it is the second most important element of your research design. Topic, then what is the question within that topic that I want to address? Now we come to a very difficult part. We come to what we call the literature review. This is an essential part of a research design because we cannot, in research, we cannot reinvent the wheel. If something is already written by somebody else, then it is our job as the researcher to know, okay, what is already the state of knowledge? Because I cannot repeat what someone has done before. That will not be considered novel. That will not get me my PhD. Okay? So I have to read up what has been written already on women, self-help groups, empowerment, and socioeconomic status. The reason I'm calling this difficult is because in this day and age, there is just like a lot of literature on practically every topic. And so you cannot read for 100 years. It's not possible, right? So what we have to do is to come up with a system, and this is part of your research design, to say, okay, how am I going to limit or bound my literature review? How am I going to limit it? So there are two ways in which I advise people to do this. Either think of 10 or 12, 15, no more than that, 10, 12, 15 important writers in this field and read everything those people have written. And it will give you a big range, but you're sticking with the 12 to 15 most important writers. That's one way. Nobody will say you haven't done your research and your homework, but you are not stuck with reading like everything that has ever been written on this topic, because that's an impossible situation. The second thing you can do is say, okay, I'm not going to go by these 10, 12 or 15 important writers, because there may be many excellent papers by other people also. It's possible, right? Everybody who's written a good paper is not already very famous, right? So the second option is for you to say, okay, I'm going to look for the top journals, like the best ranked, most respected journals, 10 or 12 of the top ranked journals in this area. And I'm going to read everything in those journals on this topic. Not everything in those journals generally, but everything in those journals on this topic. For example, if I was going with your research problem of women's self-help group and empowerment, I would say you can read a journal like Gender and Development. You can read a journal like World Development. You can read a journal like Annual Review of Resources and Environment, which have many different topics, but including gender, right? You can read, for example, IDS Bulletin, which is free online, comes out of England. So think in terms of what are the top 10 journals that carry articles on women and economic empowerment, and read all the women and economic empowerment articles in those journals. And that will also give you a breadth. But in both those, whether you go by the authors or whether you go by the journals, it sort of, there's a beginning and an end, right? Because you've bounded how you do your literature review. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be open to other sources, but use this as a starting point through authors or through journals, because that way you get a full range of the field. If you go over 10 years or 12 years, 15 years of research, you get a full range of the field, and you might miss one or two papers here and there, but basically you'll be fine. Okay. I prefer the journal approach, because it's very possible that there is, like, say, for example, a young scholar, and I don't know her name or his name, but they're in a good journal, and that way I won't miss them, right? So I personally prefer the journal way, but the other way is also acceptable. But think about this, because you must have a strategy for your literature review. Otherwise, it will become an impossible situation. Okay, all right. The next element of a research design is what we call a research strategy, which is the logic by which you apply your data to your methods. I have slides on this below, so I'm going to come to that again. If it's not obvious now, I will have full slides on this, okay? So I'm coming back to this. But this is called research strategy. The thing to understand is, what is the logic or the reasoning by which I'm going to use my data to tell my story? And there are 3 or 4 different ways of doing this, and I'm going to discuss them later in this lecture. The next major element is, do you have a theoretical framework or a hypothesis? Everybody here, are they social scientists or natural scientists?
Most of them are from social science, madam.
Most of them are from, so that's like me.
Yes, madam. All are from social science. One is law. 2, 3 are from law, madam.
Oh,
Most
that's
of
fine. That's fine.
economics
That's very
and
similar.
economics and commerce,
So that's like me. That's like myself also. So in social sciences, we have usually, for a good research design, we want there to be not necessarily model. That is only for economics. Forget the model for now. We have theoretical framework, or we have a hypothesis that we're testing. Either a theoretical framework within which we are trying to understand our data, or a hypothesis that we are collecting our data to test. Let me pause for a moment and say, why do I need a theoretical framework or a hypothesis? A theoretical framework or a hypothesis is more general than just your specific study. So if you collect your specific study, so let me go back to this example raised by the gentleman, women's self-help group and empowerment or socioeconomic status. So let me ask the person who responded with this answer, are you doing a case study in one place?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay, what place?
In Shimoga district, madam. Shimoga district.
Yeah,
It's a
I know
district.
Shimoga. Yeah. Okay, now Shimoga is one district in Karnataka, correct?
Yes, madam.
Karnataka is one state in India. India is one country on earth. Why I should be interested in Shimoga? There is no reason. Unless somebody is from Shimoga, why should they care? When you have a hypothesis to test, and then you're saying, this is my broad hypothesis, and I'm giving you the data from Shimoga as an illustration of that broader hypothesis, as an example of that broader hypothesis, then I have worked in Shimoga, but I have made the case of Shimoga more generally useful and interesting to people who are interested in that topic, but maybe not in Shimoga. Similarly, if you have a theoretical background framework, either works, either a hypothesis or a theoretical framework. If you have a theoretical framework, then you're placing your work on Shimoga and your findings and your results on Shimoga in that broader framing. And you're saying, I'm presenting you the case of Shimoga through my methods and my data as part of a broader family of cases. And that broader family of cases is what I'm calling a theoretical framework. Are there any questions?
That means Shimoga is an example that should be relevant for the other state also, other district also.
We don't know that directly, but it's an example. We don't know if the other district is going to be exactly like Shimoga, but we are going to say that Shimoga is teaching us certain things that may be relevant elsewhere.
Yes, madam. Yes. Thank you.
We cannot say 100% Shimoga is going to be relevant elsewhere. No, I cannot say that, right? But I can say, here's something I learned from Shimoga. There are self-help groups in many parts of Karnataka. There are self-help groups in many parts of India. There are self-help groups that succeed and fail in achieving empowerment and socioeconomic status. Here is a case study that has successfully shown the connection between self-help group and socioeconomic status. So that is something that I can then think about if I go to a different place.
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
As a starting hypothesis, right?
Yes, madam. Absolutely correct. Yes, madam. Yes,
I'm going to give one example that is not about self-help groups. I will give a different kind of example that I think the audience will understand right away.
Okay, ma'am.
Caste differentiation in India is a theoretical framework. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
We know that for many generations, Hindu society has been divided along caste lines, even though these things are changing in urban life and all that, of course, right? Society is always changing, okay? But I know that caste is an important aspect of the way Indian life is organized, especially in rural areas, but not completely gone in urban areas either, okay? Now, what I can say is, okay, when I go to my case study in Shimoga, one of the things I'm going to look at is there a caste distinction between women of different castes and how they are being impacted by being in the self-help group or not? Why am I going to do that? I'm going to do that because if I look at caste, I know that caste is important from other work outside Shimoga. And if I examine caste in the context of Shimoga as an example, then Shimoga is also going to tell me something about how caste operates. So it will be connecting to a larger theoretical framework. In this case, the theoretical framework is caste differentiation. There can be many other theories that you might want to focus on, but you should choose a framework that is beyond your case study, but also exists in your case study, so that the theory can help you understand your case, and so that your case can also help understand the theory better, thus making your work an example of something that is important beyond only that location.
Yes, madam.
Waiting in case there are questions.
With samples, madam, with samples, can you take that whether it is sometimes success story will be there, sometime average story will be average performance will be there, lower performance will be there. Based on that, also we can choose any area or like a kind of thing will be there. No?
So let's take in the self-help group example, for example.
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay, so let us take an example of performance. So one example of performance might be, I'm making this up, okay? Because I'm just giving this as an example. Let us say that we are interested in, when you think about performance, you need a measurable outcome of performance. What are we measuring? Am I going to measure the performance as income? Am I going to measure the performance of their children are going to school? Am I going to measure the performance by saying those blue tarpaulins have been replaced by a proper roof?
Yes.
I'm going to choose an outcome that makes sense as a sign or a performance of a self-help group enhancing socioeconomic status.
Yes.
Okay? But it's not enough for me to show. Well, it's enough for me, but it's limited if I say, in Shimoga, the women who joined self-help groups and took loans from self-help groups were able to replace their roofs from that blue tarpaulin stuff to sheet metal or corrugated metal. Okay?
Yes, madam.
That's just telling me something about Shimoga. What I need to be able to answer through my broader framework is, why did I look at the roof?
Yes, madam.
Why I looked at the roof? Because I know from the broader literature that a pakka roof, as opposed to a kacha roof, is a sign of socioeconomic status. I know that from the broader theoretical literature.
Yes, madam.
And so if I also look at that outcome, then I'm tying myself into that broader literature and allowing myself to say something that speaks to the broader theoretical literature and framework and not to Shimoga alone.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, madam.
Because even to know that you should look at the roof is knowledge. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Shall I proceed, or is there some other question?
Participants have any questions? No questions?
No, madam. No, sir. No,
Can you
no,
ask if
madam.
I'm going too fast?
No, no.
Okay, good. So now we've got these six or six elements of the research design were the most difficult elements of the research design, but you see why you need each of them, right? You need each of them to design your research. All of this is happening, by the way. We haven't come to data yet. Data is still coming. All of this stuff has to be done before that. Because, okay, why? Why? Why do I not like focusing on data collection and methods before thinking of research design? If I don't have a research question, or I don't have my literature review, and I don't have a theoretical framework, how the heck do I know what data to collect? It makes no sense to think about data and methods without this background work. That's what's going to tell me what data to collect. Finally, at the end of slide 4, now I know I need to look at roofs, right? So you have to do this background work before jumping into data and methods, because that's what you need to tell your story. Your data is now going to work with your literature review, work with your research strategies, work with your theoretical framework to help you to tell your story. Continuing with elements of a research design, the next elements of a research design are sources of data and types of data. I think I don't need to explain too much of this. There are multiple sources of data we have. There are multiple types of data. Some is primary, some is secondary, some involve speaking to people, some involve counting and measuring, but there are many, many types of data that are suitable for social science analysis. Then we have to think about, okay, I know the sources of data that I need. For example, one of the sources of data that I need is going to be the roof, right? I'm just using this example of, if I'm looking at the blue roofs, I'm going to say that's not successful. If I'm looking at corrugated sheet metal, I'm going to say that's a better performance. So that's one data point. That's my outcome data, these roofs. I also need input data like, has the woman joined a self-help group or not? I need that data. I might need, how long has she been a member of the group? Because if she has been a member of the group for only 6 months, I may not expect very much. But if she has been around for 6 years, I may expect more of an impact. So you have to think through the logic of what are the data I need to collect. And then you get to, what are my data collection methods? So for example, if I'm looking at roof, what is the most natural data collection method?
Pardon, madam. Once again.
If my performance measure
Yes, madam.
is a pakka roof
Yes,
as
madam.
opposed to a kacha roof,
Yes, madam.
how do I collect that data?
For secondary data, census are there, madam. Census data for the secondary data of all the entire village and entire town of all the country.
So the secondary data of a census gives you the data on the kinds of roofs?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Kind of
And
all
what
kind of,
about whether the person is a member of the self-help group or not?
that we have to go to the field, madam.
So you have to go to the field, because
Yes.
census is not going to tell you who is a
Yes.
member of SHG.
Yes, madam.
So you're stuck with the field. In this
Yes.
case, for this problem, sometimes you're not, but for this problem, you're stuck with the field.
Yes, madam.
So then we'll talk about sampling in a moment, but then you have to go to the field, right? Now you've gone to the field and you've found out the membership list and all that, and you've gone to that person's house because you now know that they're a member of an SHG. Then what is your data collection method about the roof? Now you're in the field.
Yes, madam. We'll observe the house.
You'll observe the house. It's completely obvious what
Yes.
kind of roof it is, right? So this is going to be a combination of asking, talking to people, and observation.
Yes.
Your methods here are going to be talking to, interviewing and or surveying and observation, right? So those things also you have to think about in advance as you're planning your research design. How do I collect the data that I need to collect, right? Then the next point I don't want to discuss in detail, but I want you to remember that you need to do data reduction and analysis also. Sometimes you can come back with like too much data, or some respondents have given you very bad quality data. They didn't complete the survey, or you couldn't. So you have to also have a strategy for, when do I drop an observation? So for example, my rule is if I have in a survey, 10% of the questions have not been answered or 10% of the data are missing, I'm going to consider that a bad quality survey and I'm going to drop that respondent. But if like 5% is a little unclear or missing, I'm going to say, that's okay. Right? But you're going to do that consistently. You cannot drop 10% in one case, 3% in another. No, you have to do that consistently. What is going to cause you to drop the data? And of course, that's going to reduce your sample size, but you want high quality data as opposed to low quality, large sample size. Your research design also contains your budget and your time. Do I have 5 years? Do I have research assistants? Can I train people to do the surveys? Do I have trained people on ODK, or am I going to use ballpoint and pen? How long can I do this? How many villages can I cover with the budget that I have? So all of that is also an essential part of your research design. You can't come up with questions and hypotheses that you don't actually have the resources to work on. So it's a very essential part of your research design also. And finally, I think if we are honest researchers, we will think about the strengths and limitations of our approach. What were we able to show? What were we able to do well? And what were we not able to do well? Because that's also an important aspect of the research design. So a research design is not really a research proposal, because when you write a research proposal, you're trying to get money for the research. The job of a research proposal is for you to get the money. But the job of a research design is for you to have a logical step-by-step way of thinking about how all the pieces of your research are connected clearly, logically, transparently, so it guides your research for the next 2 or 3 years. That is what a research design looks like. And now, if there are no questions, I'm going to get into the specifics of some of these elements.
Madam, bad quality data or good quality data, the how based on the questionnaire, madam, based on questionnaire, or how the respondent going to response.
Based on the responses, we have to decide this one. He is asking, madam. Based on the responses of the respondent, we have to decide that whether this is a good quality or bad quality.
Okay. So let me answer this. This is a very good question. Thank you for asking it. If the respondent has just not answered certain questions, like just didn't answer anything, it's blank. The surveyor comes back to you, or maybe you are the surveyor, and they're just not answering. They're just not saying anything. Or they're saying something which is clearly not an answer to your question. Clearly, it is not an answer to your question. That item we're going to consider bad quality data. If the respondent contradicts themselves often in the course of a survey, once or twice it might be, or the respondent doesn't know. He doesn't know is not a bad answer. Doesn't know could be the truth, right? You never take out doesn't know, but it could be totally the truth, right? But if it is not that, if it is contradicting, then that survey is not making sense, because you can't accept the whole thing as fact, because they're inconsistent, right? So for example, when we were collecting data in the Hubli situation, Hubli Dharwad, as you know, we worked there for many years with Dr. Bilava. There were a couple of answers where when we asked what is the religion, in a couple of cases, the answer was, I'm a Hindu Christian. Now, what is a Hindu Christian? I mean, that's a very weird answer, right? Like, what is that is not a thing. It's not, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. So I'm not going to consider I'm not going to consider that answer. I'm going to drop that answer. If the whole survey of this respondent is peculiar in this way, I'm going to drop the whole respondent. So you will get a sense of What's a sensible answer? Not what is the correct answer. You can't know what is the correct answer because you're asking them for the answer. But you will know what is a sensible answer. And if it's a sensible answer, you will keep it. And if it's not a sensible answer, you may want to drop it. And my rule is if someone has given 5%, 6% missing data or slightly weird data, I can still drop those specific questions and I can still use that respondent. But if it's like 10% or so, then I'm distrusting that whole respondent. And I'm not going to keep that number. I'm not going to keep that household. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Yes, madam.
Okay.
And then another one addition to this one, madam.
Yeah.
We have to go by for each and every respondent's responses, what they have responded, each and every respondent's responses of all the questions, how they have responded. Based on that only we have to decide, madam.
That's how you would decide, yes.
Yes, madam. Each
Because you don't want to drop, right? You're going to lose your data if you drop.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Only if it turns out that it's internally peculiar, too many missing questions, too many missing answers, right? Your participants, do they collect their own data or they also work with survey companies or they work with other people who are collecting their survey data for them?
In this program, madam, the free bus service has been given in Karnataka state government. Free buses for the women, madam. That we have given them the assignment. We are going to collect that data through the Kobo, madam. Kobo, that software is there, no, madam. Kobo, like ODK, both are same, madam.
Yeah, no, I understand what the ODK. If you are collecting your own data, it doesn't matter. But sometimes you're working in a big group of people,
yes,
and you have many surveyors. Like I've done this both in Hubli as also in Bangalore, right? Because we had to go to, and in Hubli, I think we collected from like 4,000 households, right? So we had a team of people working with us. Another way to see whether the data are good quality or not is to check periodically how long the survey is taking on average.
yes.
So if on average the survey for most people is taking 30 or 40 minutes, but you have one fellow who is finishing in 10 minutes, that's a problem situation.
Yes,
right? So there are these ways in which you're going to try to understand, is this data reliable or not? Because even though we want a large sample size, we want a good quality sample.
yes,
because if your data are rubbish, then your research also going to be rubbish.
yes, ma'am.
So it's better to take out the data that you don't trust and go with the smaller sample that you have. That's what I would do.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now I'm going to move on to, so everyone's got the elements of the research design, all of these pieces. And now I'm going to explain a little more about specific elements in the research design. Okay, not all of them, but specific ones which need more examples or need a little more explanation. Okay. So I want your participants, please, to not feel shy, and they can feel free to interrupt me anytime. Because
yes,
I don't want to proceed if I'm not clear, because if one slide is not clear, you don't ask me, then even the next slide will not be clear, right?
Yes.
So don't feel shy, just stop me anytime you need to.
Okay, ma'am.
Madam, just
No problem.
madam, one minute question, madam. You
Tell me.
find out the 4,000 household for making the for respondents. How are you going to find out, madam, those people? Because some self-help groups having active members, some of will be not active members. It's based on the only for looking for the gram panchayat, or go for the some key persons for a village background. Then you go for the random sampling or all those things, madam. Can you give some ideas?
So now your situation, the self-help group situation, is a little more complex than our original Hubli study, because we were only interested in households who had piped water, okay? Your problem is more complex because your sample is more complex. Why? Because you need first to identify the self-help groups. that you're interested in. And then you want to understand about whether the membership is active or inactive, or who is participating and who is not participating. Isn't that right?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Correct.
So then you have a two-step procedure. First, you have to identify the self-help groups. Then you have to dig inside the self-help groups to think about whom you should actually talk to and sample, because you're not very interested in the inactive participants. You're mostly interested in the active participants. You have a two-step problem. You either sample at the self-help group level, like you have a full list of multiple self-help groups and you randomly select the self-help groups and then you talk to their members, or you choose certain self-help groups, not randomly selected. You choose them because you have a relationship with their key informants or with their leadership, and then you can randomly select amongst the population that are members of those groups.
Yes,
Both
madam. Yes.
ways work.
Thank you.
Both
Thank you.
ways will. Okay? Both ways will work. They have slightly different biases, but both ways will work. Was that clear?
Yes, madam. Yes, it's
All
correct.
right. If there are no other questions, I'll proceed. So what I'm going to proceed to now is further explanation of specific elements of this list that I've showed you. Not all, but specific ones. So first, we're going to look at examples of research questions, and I want to explain how you word the question can actually make a difference to your data and your methods within the same theme. I'm going to make my research topic not women and self-help groups. I'm going to make the research. So for example, nowadays, throughout the Western world, including also India, China, etc., there is a strong push to use electrification and electricity as the source of light and heat and cooking and whatnot because of climate change problem, right? Okay, so, but not everybody is keen to electrify everything. Some members of the public are not very keen. Some members of the public are happy to do it. So one question, so then I'm going to say, okay, my research theme, my research topic is electricity intensification and public perceptions, public opinion of electrification. That's my topic, but it's not a question. What are the questions that can emerge? One question can be, well, what concerns does the public have about intensive electrification as a climate change mitigation technology to control climate change? What concerns does the public have about going more and more electric? So that question is asking, essentially, if the public are not willing to electrify all of their household heating and energy technologies, why are they not? What are the concerns? What are they worried about? What are they afraid about? Is it cost? Cost could be one reason. Do they think it's risky? Risk could be one reason. Are there so many electricity outages that they feel like, oh my God, I'm suddenly going to be stuck without electricity, so if I better not electrify everything, right? There are so many reasons that the public could have concerns, and we want to understand those concerns because we can't promote the policy of electrification without understanding what fears the public have, right? That's one way to ask a question. A second question, a different kind of question might be, why does the public seem to care more about some risks of electrification and less about other risks, even though they are equally probable? So what would be the way that I would answer this second question, if that was my question, as opposed to the first question? The first question, I already gave you examples of what we might want to look at. How would I answer? Give me some ideas on how to answer the second question. If that was my question, what would I do? What would I need to understand?
No, please tell me, madam, some simple way. Can you?
Yes. So if my question was, what concerns does the public have about electrification? Then the data I'm going to collect are going to be about what are their fears and what are their concerns. Right? I'm going to ask, do you want to electrify your heating and your cooking? No, I don't want to electrify. Why don't you want to electrify your heating and your cooking? It's too expensive. I prefer gas. Right? Or it could be like, I cannot electrify my cooking. There are so many power outages every day that suddenly there'll be a power outage while I'm cooking lunch. Right? These are concerns that people can have that will make them say, no, I don't need to. I'm sorry about climate change, but I'm not going to electrify. Right? That's one type of question. A second different question might be, why am I more concerned about some risks and less about others? That's a slightly different question than the first question. Because that question is asking me to collect what kind of data? Not only the risks and concerns, but also what is their biggest risk and concern? What are they extra worried about? Because when we have risks and concerns, we have some big worries and then we have some small worries, right? So with the first question, what concerns, I can find out the range of their worries and concerns. The second question is going to tell me the bigness or the littleness of these different risks and concerns, because if I'm going to promote electrification, I want to discuss the big concerns first. I don't want to waste my time with the small concerns because they may not matter that much. Is that clear?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. I
Okay, so
absolutely.
what I want to say is there are many ways of asking questions within a particular theme, and we need to decide which question are we going to focus on, because each of these question types actually require slightly different methodological approach and slightly different data collection approach. Okay?
Yes,
So
madam.
we should be clear. We should be clear in our mind. If we are actually interested in the second question, we don't want to get stuck collecting data only on the first question because we won't be able to answer our second question that way.
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
So the question needs to be very, very clear. When I talk to my students, we spend some weeks just sharpening the question, because that only after that am I going to be able to guide them on their methods and their data collection. So the first thing, so what's my first takeaway from this class, from this talk? Total clarity about research question. Total clarity about research question. No confusion there, because that research question, the clearer it is, the easier it's going to be for me to collect data around it. Of course, you can, as I said, instead of saying question, you can also have research objective. We talked about that, a research objective, shape my question, my scope conditions. Effectively, it's like a question, except that I'm explaining it. I'm talking about it like an objective, like my objective is to describe, my objective is to explain. Instead of saying my objective is to describe, I could have said, what? With a question mark. It would be the same thing. The gentleman who told me about his research problem, his interest was to evaluate the bottom objective. He said, what impact does joining an SHG have on women's empowerment and socioeconomic status? That is, if I were going to make that into a sentence instead of a question, I would say he wants to evaluate the impact of joining a self-help group on empowerment and income. Sometimes you want to understand, sometimes you want to evaluate, sometimes you want to predict. These are slightly different objectives. It's perfectly fine to have a research objective instead of a research question. It's the same thing, but again, you have to be very, very clear and sharp about what your objective is. Because if it's muddled, you won't be able to collect the data that you need. So this clarity is very important before you do a single thing. Before you do a single thing, you want clarity on your research question. Now I
That
want to
means
get to,
that
please.
means after clarity of the objectives, we are clarity with respect to the research question.
It is the same thing. You can either have objective or you can have a question. It's the same thing. You can think of it like an objective or you can think of it like a question.
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
So, yeah. So if the gentleman who's working on SHGs is here, he can say, my objective is to evaluate the effect of joining an SHG on women's self-empowerment and socioeconomic status. Or he can say, what is the impact of joining an SHG on women's self-empowerment and impact? It's the same thing. One is a statement, one is a question. Whichever way you want to do it, it doesn't matter to me, but it needs to be very clear.
Yes, madam.
We should not say, I want to understand, evaluate the impact, comma, and I also want to understand, comma, and then, no, you will never finish. You need complete clarity. So then you know, okay, these are the data I need. These are the data I don't need. Okay?
Yes, madam. Yes.
All right, good. Now, this, when I'm working with my PhD students, takes me 2-3 months just to get their questions straight. Because you know why? Usually people are interested in too many different things. Their interests are very broad, and they are not able to make it a sharp question that can be one research paper. So it's not easy to do. That's why it takes me a little time with my students working. It's not easy to do because people have big interest, thematic interest, and then they're forced to sharpen it into one smaller question and leave other things out. Okay, so it's a little bit difficult to do. I mean, I'm spending time on it because it's not actually easy in practice. Okay, now I have my research objective or my research question. And is it muddled or is it clear?
It's clear.
It's totally clear. Okay. Only once it's totally clear, I'm allowed to go on to the next step. My next step is, what is the logic by which research questions are answered? And this is not about data collection methods. This is about data collection logic. Let me explain what I mean. There are 4 major logics. Systems, let's say systems by which research questions are answered. One is the inductive, what we'll call the inductive logic. That means I have a question and I am going to collect data and I'm going to look for patterns and correlations within that data, which I don't know in advance whether they will exist or not. So I'm going to collect a range of data, and then I'm going to look to that data to see, oh, are there major patterns and correlations emerging? Is that clear, or do you want an example?
No, madam, it's absolutely clear, madam. Clear.
Good. A second way is the deductive method, which is the more common method in science, but it is, of course, not the only method. The deductive method means I'm going to posit a hypothesis before I collect any data. Based on the literature, based on my theoretical reasoning, based on my theoretical framework, I'm going to posit a hypothesis. So, for example, a hypothesis might be, in those regions of Shimoga where self-help groups are very active, a larger percentage of households have pakka roofs as opposed to blue tarpaulin roofs. That's a hypothesis. It's like a little prediction.
Yes, madam.
Right? Now I'm going to collect data to test that hypothesis. So I'm specifically going to look at people who've joined SHGs, how long they've joined them, what kind of SHGs those are, what kind of roofs they have. I'm specifically going to collect data on roofs and SHG behavior to test whether my hypothesis is correct or it is incorrect. What is the difference between inductive and deductive?
The first one is we will make it as a not an advanced thinking. We will looking for the correlation after the collection of the data. But
Yes.
the deductive means we're making as a hypothetical imagination, and that will be
Yes.
proof for the after collecting the data.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay. So when people do experiments, so you guys know, right? People do experimental research design all the time. Experiments are usually deductive because an experiment means you've already thought of a hypothesis and then you're designing your research like an experiment around that hypothesis. So, for example, the work that we did together with Dr. Bilava in Hubli Dharwad was a natural experiment where we were comparing areas with 24/7 water with areas with intermittent water, very close to each other. The wards were very close to each other, very similar wards, so that because our hypothesis was with 24/7 water, we are going to see improvements in water quality, improvements in child health, and reductions in collecting time for women. Those were our three hypotheses. We had them in advance before we went to collect the data. And most experimental strategies, so deductive strategies don't have to be experimental, but most experimental strategies are deductive. There is a fourth form of research strategy or research system, which is called interpretive, which is exclusive to the qualitative social sciences, but I don't think it's likely to be very common amongst the participants here. So if you don't mind, I'll skip it. If you really want, I can go into it, but if you don't mind, I'll skip it. I think it's unlikely to be used by the participants at CMDR.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. So we're going to stay with inductive and deductive mainly. And we're going to know that experimental strategy is like a type of deductive research. Fine? This is what an inductive research design looks like. For example, if I'm interested in household access to safe drinking water, but I don't actually know, I don't have any previous hypothesis about how many households have access to safe drinking water in different countries or in different clusters of countries, or by GNP or GDP, or by whether they are in Africa or Asia. I don't have any hypothesis, but I'm interested in how is access to safe drinking water distributed across different households. So this is the graph. This data is from UNICEF and World Health Organization. So this is the graph that I might start with. Just put down the data on safely managed. That's the dark blue line is safely managed. That's the right standard that we want, means piped and treated water. This pale blue is basic, and basic means it's not piped and it's having to be drawn from a well or something like that, which are higher risk of contamination, okay, compared to piped water. So I'm just throwing down the data by country, and I'm going to now look at this, run some descriptive statistics, eyeball the data a little bit to see, is anything emerging? And then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going down slowly, bit by bit. Can you see my cursor? Can you see the cursor?
Yes, madam.
Okay, now I'm looking. Okay, look at the, okay, Pakistan, no, Gambia, not that great. Mauritania, not that great. Togo, not that great. Burundi, not that great. Ethiopian, okay, it looks like the African countries are clustering around low access to safely managed water. And I'm finding that as a pattern from my data. This is a classic induction research mode. Okay, I don't have any ideas. I'm looking for some correlations. I'm looking for a finding. Now I could say, okay, I'm continuing to look. Hungary, Romania, these are different countries now. India, not bad. Ghana, it's low. Liberia, it's low. Guinea, low. Now I'm going to say, now I've looked at a ton of data. And it looks like 90% or 80% of the African countries have very low levels of access. That's a finding from the data without any hypothesis to start with. Can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
It hasn't explained to me why or anything like that. But I can see what countries have low access to safe drinking water. I can answer by saying overwhelmingly the countries in sub-Saharan Africa have low access to safe drinking water. But I can't answer the why question. Can you see that? Looking at this inductive data, it's not enough to tell me why the countries have low access. I can only see which countries have low access.
Yes, madam.
Right? So I have to do something different, if more additional, if I want to get to the why question. We're not going to talk about that right now. I just want to first point out that the inductive research pattern, inductive research logic can give us these patterns, but they can't necessarily give reason. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes, madam.
Now I'm going to say the results of a deductive research strategy. Now let us say I have done that inductive work, or maybe I didn't do the inductive work. Maybe I'm positing a hypothesis saying I'm going to hypothesize that countries with low gross domestic product or gross national income, low GDP per capita, are going to have lower access to safe drinking water, and countries with very high GDP per capita are likely to have high access to safe drinking water because, and there's a reason for that, okay? It's not a stupid hypothesis. Infrastructure is expensive. Poor countries have to do a lot of different services for their people. It's not easy to provide services to poor low-income people in low-income countries. We know that. So I'm going to hypothesize that, okay, lower income countries are going to have lower levels of access. Now, what do I need to do? What data do I need to test that hypothesis? Now, can you see that along my x-axis, I've got GDP per capita in 2021 prices, $1,000 per capita all the way to $100,000 per capita? And on the y-axis, I have access to safe or improved water sources. Can you see that?
Yes.
And you can see this little, if I did a regression line through here, I can see that, yeah, there's more lower access when I'm at the 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 per capita level. By the time I've gone to 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, it's practically 100% access. Correct?
Yes.
Now, friends, here is my question to you. I've showed you that with higher income per capita, the percentage of people with access to safe drinking water is higher. Is this an interesting or not interesting result?
It's interesting results, madam. Very interesting.
But wouldn't you have guessed it?
Yes, madam. In common man is very clearly the higher GDP, the higher the water supply. Lower the GDP and lower water supply. There's a good.
Yes, but if I
That is
say,
also,
if I tell you, I did this study and this is what I found, what would you say to me? Would you say, wow, this is a very interesting result? Or would you say, this is a very boring result? I could have guessed that anyway.
no, maybe
We
second
could
one is
have, we could have guessed, but statistically, we would have proved it. We can prove
Yes,
it.
but it is a little bit boring, you have to admit.
Yes, madam.
Okay, now we don't want to be boring in this world, yeah? But now look at what is not boring. Look at the low-income countries. Only look at the low-income countries. They are going from 50% access to 90% access. That is interesting.
Yes.
That even with what? Central African Republic, Papua New Guinea over here, right? Nepal is up here. Okay, Bangladesh is up here. So now you're saying, wow, even below $5,000, which is considered a low income, $5,000 per capita per year, there is so much variation from 50% all the way to 90%. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
That is something you would not have predicted. So
Yes.
now I can say, okay, you think I'm being boring by saying that the high income countries are doing well and the low income countries are doing badly? No, there's actually a lot of variation amongst the low income countries. And that actually is telling you there is something to understand about water supply, water governance, and so on in these countries, which are poor, but still serving their population well. Right? So in deductive work or in inductive work, in deductive work, you don't want to suggest a hypothesis which everyone is going to say, like, I know that already. Why do you want to spend 2 years of doing statistical analysis when anyway we could have guessed this already? You want to look for something that is a little bit interesting and not 100% obvious, which makes for a more interesting and original research problem. Whether you are doing deductive work or you are doing inductive work, you're looking for something that is not totally obvious. Right? And that is part of your research judgment. Would you like to take a 5-minute break or should I continue?
We'll take a 5 minutes break, madam.
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay. 5 minutes break ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಒಂದು 5 ನಿಮಿಷ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ರೀ. ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೆಂಟ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು 5 ನಿಮಿಷ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ರೀ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ, ಮಾತಾಡ್ರಿ ಉಳಿದಾರಲ್ಲ. ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಟು.
Back?
Yes, madam.
Is everyone back?
Yes,
Yes,
madam.
madam.
Okay, good, great. All right, so now we've covered inductive and deductive research strategies. I've already explained that experiments are also deductive in nature. And I've also discussed how you want your hypothesis to have a little bit of a puzzle. You don't want it to become like 100% obvious what the answer will be, because that does not make for interesting research. Okay, we're now going to move on to the next element, which is sources and types of data. So the data that you collect information from, it can come from individuals, which was why our Hubli Dharwad study was households, small groups, for example, students in a school or members of a self-help group, those are small groups, or large dispersed groups like the whole city or national groups or whatever. So data can come from many different types of units, and obviously your data collection is going to vary depending on where your data are coming from. But when you have a large number of items to choose from, you have to find a way of sampling. So Dr. Anagodimath, did we already cover sampling in this workshop?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
This has already been covered.
Covered, madam. Covered.
Okay, so shall I skip over the next couple of slides then?
Okay, madam. Okay.
Shall I skip?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay, so we know about sampling and sampling frames. And did we also cover methods of sampling by dropping pins using Google Earth?
No, madam. This has not been
Okay.
covered.
Okay, so let me talk about just a couple of modern or interesting methods of sampling. So everybody knows what is a sample, random sample. We're going to draw it from our census or sampling frame. And traditionally, we have to go door to door, or traditionally, we have to talk to key informants to make us, to help us with the sampling frame. But another way to do it, so this is a picture from Google Earth. So you can ask Google Earth to take a photograph of the different areas that you want to work in. And you can tell Google Earth, randomly drop 500 pins. And it will literally randomly drop 500 pins, which are all got geotagged. They have GPS coordinate attached to the pins. And you can choose your random sample that way, because by definition, you've randomly chosen it. But the much faster method, if you can do it. if you can do it, right? So that's one way to kind of think about a novel way to do random sampling without any biases, a completely random sample, and it's geotagged for you also. So that makes it easier for you to find the nearest household. So that's
Madam,
one way.
geotag house means what? What, madam?
GPS coordinate.
Okay.
You
Every
know
house
the
having it.
GPS from the pins. So if you
Yes.
are going around with a phone, you will put that GPS into your phone and you will find the household.
Oh, yes,
Or
madam.
if you have iPad or tablet, right, you can find the GPS. So you'll
Yes, madam. Yes.
basically select by GPS.
Yes, madam.
But the
In
GPS is randomly chosen for you. So you can, and this is a nice method of sampling if you have tablets and phones with GPS capacity. If you don't have tablets and phones with GPS capacity, of course, you cannot do this.
yes, madam. Google,
But if
Google
you
Earth
do,
has this specialty, madam. Dropping of pins, madam. Google Earth has that this one service,
yeah,
madam.
yeah,
It's I
Google
think
Earth. And Google Earth is free,
free. Okay, madam. Okay, okay.
right? Google Earth is free. Everybody can use it.
Yes, madam. Yes.
So this is actually from, this we did in Allahabad. So it's an actual example,
Okay,
right?
madam.
Okay. Tell me, let me see. If I do this method,
Yes,
remember
madam.
we talked about dropping some samples. We sometimes have to drop a respondent. Like if I did this method of sampling, which samples would I drop?
Sure, this Shivamoga, madam, SSG for some the entire district or for
No,
self.
supposing I drop the pins in the area where I'm working,
Yes, madam.
what would I drop? Where would I not go to sample? Which pin will I not use?
Means richer kind of households we should not go for this one, no, madam. That woman
Well, we
empowerment.
may be interested in rich household also.
Yes, madam.
But
Then
supposing it falls into a river, I can't go there,
yes, madam. Yes, madam.
right?
River, forest.
Supposing on a hospital,
Yes, madam.
if you see my cursor, do you see this thing?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
It's a hospital.
Ha, ha, ha.
I'm dropping it because I'm not good. But of course, Google engine doesn't know, right? So it's dropping wherever.
Yes,
I can
madam.
only follow the ones that are actually households.
Ha,
So
ha.
you've got to be, working with the technology. Technology is helping you.
Yes,
Technology
madam.
is not doing all the work for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we are always thinking along, okay, how do I use this method?
Yes, madam.
Sometimes in more difficult circumstances, this is my cluster sample from Bangalore, East Bangalore. Sometimes you might have a difficult situation. So one nice thing about using this pin method is you don't need a census.
Yes, madam.
You don't need to choose from a census. You just drop the pins. If you have to choose with a census, because your research design is like a cluster design,
Yes,
where
madam.
you have to have all these clusters. Some are following one type, some are another type, mixed low-income clusters, as you can see from this slide, mixed income clusters and low-income clusters. And you want to separate the clusters so that they're not, spillover effects are not happening because you want to do it comparison. Then you actually cannot use that pin method. And you have to go to, find the official maps of the city, do a survey of that area and divide up the clusters. Then these complex sampling mechanisms, they don't open themselves up as well to technological shortcuts. The simpler samples you can do with technological shortcuts. The complex samples, you're stuck with walking the beat.
Yes, madam.
Okay, so you have to think like, what can I use and what can I do? But basically, these are all different ways of figuring out who your sample should be. And you also have to think about where to sample from. What do I mean by where to sample from? You can sample in what we call a natural social setting. So for example, a natural experiment, the type that we did with Hubli Dharwad, 24/7 water supply in some houses, intermittent water supply in other houses. I had no control over which houses had 24/7 water and which houses were intermittent, right? That is something that the BWSSB did. I have no control. But I'm setting up the experiment, and that's why I'm going to call it a natural experiment, because I'm actually looking at a circumstance which naturally exists before I came. So that's called a natural social setting. Then there can be a semi-natural setting, which is usually focus groups or interviews. The focus group might be in the village or town where you work, but the focus group is only coming together because of your survey, because of your study, right? So that is called a semi-natural setting. There can be totally artificial settings, such as certain experiments or games. And don't forget that you can also sample artifacts, like you can sample wells. You don't have to sample only people. You can sample wells. You can sample newspapers, right? Anything can be sampled. Depending on your source of information, you are going to choose the appropriate sampling strategy. And you're not going to think that, okay, I only have to talk to people to have a sample. There are multiple ways of doing sample and multiple units that can be sampled, what not necessarily living people. Okay? Any questions thus far? Has anybody in the participant group ever tried to sample newspapers?
No, madam.
It's a very interesting activity and very time consuming, because the newspapers are coming out every day,
Yes,
right? Multiple languages, okay? Right in Bangalore, you'll find Hindi, Kannada, Telugu, English,
madam.
everything. So you have to make that decision, like, what is my sampling frame? How do I sample from a huge potential universe, right? So you have to do these things very carefully, because each sample strategy will carry its own biases,
Yes,
right? So, and you have to be aware of what those biases are. You can't always do something about it, but you have to be aware.
yes, madam.
Now, let us
Yes,
imagine
madam.
that you're
Newspaper,
not collecting.
with respect to newspaper sampling, madam. If
Yes?
farmer, it is kind of sampling like this, madam. If a farmer in with respect to the farmer suicide, madam, which is reported in the newspaper,
Yes.
based on that only will go, that is called sampling of through newspaper, is it the one, madam?
If you were going to look at reporting of farmer suicides, you would be sampling newspapers. Yes.
Then
That's a
there is
good example. You will be sampling newspapers. You
uh,
can also, I suppose, sample radio or something like that, radio transcripts. But I would say the newspapers would be the most obvious place in which to go if you're looking for farmer suicides. That's a great example. I want to ask one question of you, sir. Your sample from
yes.
newspapers of farmer suicides, do you think it might have a bias?
This is only reported who has died with the this one, madam, who got suicide, they committed suicide. That information will.
Sometimes all death is not put down as a suicide, even if it is. So
Uh-huh.
that's something you need to know, and you need to explain to your reader. I went to
Okay.
the newspapers because that was the most uh, informative source of farmer suicides. Nonetheless, this is probably an underestimate, and that is a bias in my study. That goes under limitations.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
So now it's also possible that you don't do primary data analysis, but you're going to use only secondary data.
Yes, madam. Yes.
That's also possible. Are the participants interested in some of the aspects of secondary data also, or
Uh,
not so much?
Yes, madam.
Because I don't want to be teaching something that you don't want to use.
Yes,
that
madam.
will, some people are doing on secondary data also, madam.
Some people are doing a secondary data. Okay.
Yes, madam. Yes.
So I don't need to tell you how to do statistics and whatnot on secondary data, because you guys know that and other people are teaching that. There's one aspect of secondary data that I want to emphasize, because this lecture is about research design, right? Understanding the strengths of your research, understanding the logic of your research. There is one aspect of secondary data that we often fail to take into account. Secondary data are only a reflection of the truth. If you are doing primary data yourself, that is 100% trustworthy, because you're completely in control of your data quality, of your data meaning, right? When you look at secondary data, you have not controlled the collection of that data, right? Maybe the person who collected that data wasn't even thinking about your research question. You're using somebody else's data for a different research question that you're interested in. And so you need to understand a little bit about the social context in which these data are collected. So that's a very important thing for you to interpret your data and put your data into the right explanation and the right research design. So let me give an example. Let me say that your research topic, your research interest is domestic violence.
Okay.
Okay? It's not a nice topic, of course. But of course, suicide is also not a nice topic.
Yes,
But
yes,
the problem with social scientists, we are always talking about very sad topics. So this is another one. Suicide is also a very bad topic, a very tragic topic, and domestic violence also a very tragic topic. Okay? Now, how will you find data on domestic violence? What is your source?
Newspaper, man. One thing.
Newspapers, police record,
Records, court.
right? Police
Court.
are also keeping records,
Yes, ma'am.
newspapers, crime statistics, okay? So
Crime.
there are these official records.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, let us look at the crime statistic of domestic violence. I want us to walk through how you go from a crime to a crime statistic, because you do not have access to the crime. You have only access to the crime statistic or the crime report. Is that right?
Yes.
That is clear?
Clear.
Now, let us say that a crime occurs, and this crime I'm saying is domestic violence. Okay? Abuse of an older person or abuse of a wife, something like this, beating up and so on. So the first thing that I just walk through this with me carefully. The first thing that has to happen is the victim should be alive. Otherwise, she's not able to lodge a complaint. Or somebody can see. The neighbor sees, or maybe her family sees, right? Somebody has to be alive and around to report that crime. Is that completely clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what you are seeing is not a crime. What you are seeing is somebody being beaten. An older person or a wife or someone like that, right? Or sister, who knows? Somebody is being beaten. Usually it's a woman, of course, not always, but usually. That was what you're seeing. You have to, before you report it to the police, you have to recognize that this is a crime. Do you understand what I mean by that? Or is that not clear?
Madam?
Yeah?
Clear, ma'am. Clear.
You have to recognize it's a crime. You know what I'm saying? You have to know that it is a crime.
Yes,
Otherwise,
ma'am.
you're not going to report it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Not everybody who sees the crime being done is going to know that domestic violence is a crime. If you went to rural Uttar Pradesh, for example, and if someone saw a person beating their wife, it is perfectly possible to say, भाई ऐसे तो होता ही है, क्या करे, ठीक तो नहीं है, ठीक बात नहीं है, पर तो होता ही तो है, क्या किया जाए? That person is not going to go to the police, right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
so you have to
ma'am.
recognize, this is a crime, this needs to be reported. Okay, now they recognize it as a crime, they report it. Now you've gone to the police with the beaten up person, or her family member has gone to the police to report that this violent crime is occurring, my sister is being beaten, or my daughter is being beaten, or my mother is being abused, whatever, right? Now the police have discretion. Not always the police are recording a crime. It is possible for the policeman to say to the wife, like, what did you do that made him angry with you, that he hit you? Did you misbehave? Did you do something wrong? Otherwise, why did he hit you? This happens, right?
Yes, madam.
At the same time, he might go to the guy and he might say, you know, you are bringing shame to our community by beating your wife. People across the street can hear her crying. This is very embarrassing. You should not be behaving in such a manner. Now, you should be like a mature man and behave yourself, and tells the wife, you should try to be a good wife and not annoy your husband. And you guys, please go and try to patch it up and don't complain about one another. It's not a good thing to have complaints about the husband and wife in the police record. Can that happen?
Yes, madam. Happens in police.
100%.
Yes, madam.
100% it could happen. Right?
Yes.
If the policeman does not do that, and then he records the crime or she records the crime in their case file report, then and only then the statistic is available for you, the researcher.
Yes, madam.
When you use secondary data, always think about what are the possible biases in the data set. When you do primary data, you don't have to worry about biases in the data set. It's your data. You did it, or you supervised it. When you use secondary data of this type, especially government statistics, it's important for us to think about what could be the overestimate or the underestimate in this situation, and how do I now explain my results in the light of the social context, which either creates underreporting or creates overreporting of certain types. Because without that context, you will not know how to explain your findings. And this is a particular danger with secondary data only.
Ma'am, I have a doubt.
Yes?
Ma'am, I'm doing the study on the corporate sector or completely on secondary data. What's your opinion on that, ma'am?
But
It's a
what's your
listed
question?
company's data, ma'am.
Now, what's your question?
Ma'am, I'm doing
What's your-
completely on secondary data.
No. What is your research question? What are you looking at?
Shareholders value creation, ma'am. A study of select listed companies.
A study of what companies?
Shareholders value creation.
Shareholders value. This feels like a research topic. What is the question you're asking? Of your research, not of me. What is your research question? What are you looking at? Or what is your hypothesis? What are you looking for?
Sindor, ನಿಮ್ದು ಇದು ಶೇರ್ ಹೋಲ್ಡರ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದರದ್ದು ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಅಥವಾ ಏನು ಯು ಟೆಲ್ ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ಸಲ ಹೇಳ್ರಿ ಸಿಂಧೂರ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ನಿಮ್ದು ಮ್ಯೂಟ್
No, sir. In case of corporate database, there will not be any underreporting or overreporting like that. So, in case of secondary data, if there are no chances of underreporting or overreporting, then we can go for secondary data, right? There will not be any biasness.
I see what you're saying. Okay, I'm going to answer this gentleman because I didn't fully understand the corporate shareholder question. I'm sorry, I apologize. First of all, you cannot assume that there will be no underreporting or overreporting. You have to understand the social context in which the data is being produced in order to decide whether there is overreporting or underreporting. Okay, we're not going to assume. We're going to look at the way in which the data are produced or the social context in which the data are produced to estimate whether there is likely to be overreporting or underreporting. That's our first step. If you decide that there is not overreporting or underreporting and there is no bias in the data, that's great. You have a strong data set. But I don't want to say that if there is underreporting, you should not use secondary data, because sometimes secondary data is all you have. If you are looking at crime statistics over a 10-year period, you have to use secondary data. You have no choice. But you can interpret your secondary data analysis. You can explain your results better by taking into account whether this kind of theme has over-reporting problems generally or under-reporting problems generally. I'm not saying don't use it and look for like perfect data set. No, I'm saying understand the limitations of the data set that you are using.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay?
Okay.
Is that fine? Should I go on?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes.
Is there any other question? Okay, I'm going to proceed. All right. So the next element we've covered data. So the next element we want to cover are theories and hypotheses. I am the social theory, so the theoretical framework. It basically, theory contributes concepts and frameworks. And this particular thing I'm going to explain in the next slide. So bear with me. The thing that I want to cover on this slide is if you use inductive research strategy, sorry, there shouldn't be an and over here. If you use an inductive research strategy, that pattern recognition that I talked about, remember? Yeah, we are remembering inductive strategies?
Yes, ma'am.
That's pattern recognition. I can start developing theory or I can start developing hypotheses from pattern recognition. I can suggest a theory from the pattern recognition findings. If I use a deductive theory, then I'm starting with a hypothesis, which basically means starting with a mini theory already, and I'm using my deductive strategy to test a hypothesis, but not to come up with a new theory. That is the difference between what I can do with inductive strategies. I can generate theoretical ideas, but with deductive strategies, I cannot generate theoretical ideas. I can only test existing theoretical ideas. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
This is a very important thing for us to know, because if you are interested in developing theory, you are probably going to need inductive systems, strategies. But if you're interested in testing hypotheses and theories, then you're going to need deductive strategies. So this one I would like for you to remember, because this is an important, these two parts are very important in making our decision what kind of research strategy to use. Because the hypothesis is going to posit a relationship, correlative relationship, causal relationship, or whatever, between two variables. You test the hypotheses. Maybe the hypothesis is yes, maybe the hypothesis is no, but through the hypothesis testing method, you are not going to know why. So you cannot actually generate a theory. You can only say failed to accept or failed to reject. Okay?
Yes, madam.
That's an important thing to know in your research design. What kind of research design do I want? Do I want to suggest new theory or do I want to test existing theory? Both are good, but both are calling for different logics. Now I want to explain this part. Social theories contribute broad frameworks or hypotheses. So, what do I mean by a theory contributes a concept? And that concept is what we use when we are designing our research. So let us take the word school. A school is a concept, right? It is like a big thing. We all know what a school is, right? Yeah, we all understand what a school is?
Yes, madam.
We know what a school is. Okay, what is a school? What does a school do? What is a school for? What is the purpose of a school?
To get the knowledge.
To get the knowledge. What else does a school do?
To educate the children.
Education.
Sorry?
To educate the children.
Educate the children. So the children should acquire knowledge. The children should be educated. And may I ask, please, sir, why they should acquire knowledge and be educated? What is the purpose of this knowledge and education?
Quality of life.
Very good. So now one answer is, okay, we know what a school is. A school is a place where children go to be educated, to acquire knowledge, so that they can be independent workers themselves and so that they can have a better quality of life when they are adults. Is that a good answer?
Yes, ma'am.
That is the traditional theory of education. That theory of education leads to the concept of a school or thinking about a school as a place where children go to acquire knowledge so that they can have a better life. Now I am going to give you a different theory of education. I'm going to just propose. I'm not saying it's a better theory. I'm just going to put it out there for your consideration. Okay. I think, or I am suggesting that the real purpose of a school and a school curriculum is to make children learn exactly the same thing of exactly the same topics so that they are governable and they are being trained to do the kinds of jobs and the kinds of work that later are going to make them productive citizens so that they can be taxed for government purposes and so that they are not troublemakers. They all come out with the same ideas, the same curriculum, they've read the same books, they've read the same history, and this way they become governable and they're not troublemakers because they're all thinking the same way, and if people are all thinking the same way, they're easier to govern and easier to tax. This is not exactly the same concept of the school that you answered to me, right? But it is also a kind of theory of education, that education is not for the benefit of the masses, but it's actually for the benefit of making the elite continue to govern in a trouble-free manner. I am not going to say, I'm going to have to choose my theory of the educational system before I am able to explain what is a school. And if I just explain what is a school, then I have to think about what is my theory of the education system that makes this concept of the school the concept of the school. Because do you see that they are not the same concept, even though they are the same word?
Yes, madam.
Yeah? This is the beauty of social theory. When you have a concept of a school, of a farmer, of a manager, of a corporation, of a water users association, of a household, you are actually embedding that your concept in a theory that you need to make transparent in your own head and in your own mind so that you are consistently using that theoretical framework and consistently using that concept in a similar manner through your research project. Because on page 1, we can't have a school that is educating children for a higher quality of life. And on page 10, the school is educating children so that they are governable citizens, that they don't cause trouble and they don't harass the government. No. You have to pick a concept, understand the theory of education, in this case, education, that goes behind that concept, and carry it through in your project for the duration of that project. It has to be a clear concept. This is what I'm arguing. You cannot have an argument that is going in 4 different directions. No, that is not an argument. That's a mess. Okay? An argument goes clearly from one set of a question, data, concept, answer. Okay?
Okay.
Ma'am, one question, ma'am.
Tell me.
How to choose between these two theories, ma'am? What on what basis we have to decide, ma'am? Choosing between.
That's an excellent question. There are a couple of things that I can say to guide my answer to that question. The first answer is the more difficult answer. It is this. What do you believe the world is like? What is your worldview? What do you think government is doing? Is government there because it is building a military, building schools, building roads, and trying to make progress for the nation? Or is the government there because it's going to sit on your head and make you do what it wants to do? What is your fundamental worldview? And you can see that people have different worldviews. Some people adore Prime Minister Modi, and some people can't stand him, right? He's doing the same things, exactly the same thing, it's the same person. But their idea of what is right and proper and what is a good society are fundamentally different, which makes PM Modi perfectly fine in some people's eyes and not good in other people's eyes. There are different worldviews, and your concepts and theories can be following your worldview. If your worldview is not very clear to you, which is okay because it evolves and it changes, you can go with like the dominant form of the literature. Remember, there's a literature review that you've done. Remember about the literature review several slides ago?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
We've done a literature review, and so there are multiple ways in which school is being thought of in these literatures, maybe different ways, or corporation is being considered, or farmer is being considered, different concepts going with the same word, as we've said, which are attached to different worldviews, and you can choose amongst them the one that is most compelling and convincing to you.
Okay, ma'am.
If it's compelling and I'm convinced by these arguments, this is the line I'm going to follow, that's perfectly fine. But you must have an idea of that underlying theoretical framework within which your concept makes sense and around which you will be collecting your data. You have to be consistent. Okay, you have to become, what kind of political economy am I assuming for my study? What sort of state am I assuming for my study? If I'm working in Shimoga, what am I assuming about, or what am I arguing about the state of Karnataka within which Shimoga makes sense? Within which I can explain certain things about Shimoga, and I can say, you know what? If this same Shimoga was in Jharkhand, I might have seen different results. Because the context of Karnataka and the context of Jharkhand are very different, maybe. What kind of sociocultural setting? So this is an important thing for consistency, because you are trying to make a consistent and convincing argument. And you cannot do that if your concepts are all over the place. They have to follow the same argument and same idea through your research. And the second reason you need to have a theoretical framework and concepts straight is because they determine what we call in the social sciences the scope conditions. Scope conditions means under what circumstances or in what conditions am I going to expect your similar results to yours. So for example, if you're in Shimoga and you have certain results on self-help groups, you can argue that, there are certain rules and regulations in Karnataka that give self-help groups a certain kind of freedom and ability. And that is why these groups in Shimoga can do the kinds of activities they're doing, but in a different state where they didn't have this kind of freedom and an ability, or the state was much more autocratic than Karnataka, didn't believe in devolution to the extent that Karnataka does, maybe I won't see the same results because it's not the same basic political economy. This is a dense slide, so if there are questions or
Yes,
you
madam.
need a different explanation, tell me.
No questions, madam.
Good? So you understand now the connection between theory and concept? Okay. And you understand why you need to have it clear in your head so that you don't get messed up while you're doing your work. If you're not clear about it, you won't realize that you're using multiple contradictory concepts. That's why you need that clarity. All right? Okay. And finally, almost finally, we're coming to strengths and limitations as the last element of your research design. No method is perfect. No research design is perfect. The survey method is not perfect because sometimes people don't fully understand what it is that you're asking. The experimental design is not perfect because the only kind of experiments you can do are around very narrow hypotheses. You cannot look at very big questions experimentally. You typically have to look at very small questions experimentally. The interview method is imperfect because people use different language. They say the same things in different ways. And so aggregating interviews is much more difficult than aggregating the survey method. They all need different sample sizes and types. No one method is perfect. Every method has weaknesses and strengths. And every research design has weaknesses and strengths. And it's your job as a researcher to be clear and transparent about, this is my result. These are my contributions. And this is why my contribution is an important thing in understanding social science. This is what I could not do. And this is what I was unable to show. And so I cannot claim anything about, item B, for example. Because you're not going to be able to cover everything, answer every question, even belonging to your question in one research project. So you should say, I couldn't do this. Either my sample size was too small, or the interview method was not the right method for me to understand this, or I didn't get good answers, or this is only about Karnataka. Whatever it is, you have some limitations that prevent complete generalization from your work and leave certain questions unanswered, maybe for future research. And you should be transparent about that, because as a reader of your research, if I know that you have been honest with me about what you were unable to do, then I'm also going to believe more in the truthfulness of what you showed you could do. Because I'm going to say, hey, this is a guy who knows what they did and they know what they didn't do. That makes me believe what they say they did, because they know the difference. So to be convincing, you should acknowledge some of the limitations and weaknesses of your work. We all have them. When I write papers, I have a paragraph at the end. These are the limitations of my research design that have to be considered when you're interpreting my contributions, that those are the scope conditions that I have. And the last thing I want to end on in the last 8 minutes or so that we have is, the final thing to consider is, that in social science research, we have to have ethical clearance, right? We have to sign a document explaining how we will maintain moral standards in the field, how we will protect our subjects, how we will be accountable to them when we're in the field. This is a uniquely social science problem. Engineers, they don't have this problem. Okay, people who are studying planets or rats or something, we don't have this problem. Okay? But only people like us who are studying human beings in society, in contemporary society, we have this problem, right? We have to follow the local code of conduct in the field. If you're in India, you follow Indian rules. If you're in Tanzania, you follow Tanzanian rules. But you have to actually follow these rules to maintain ethical standards and moral standards when in the field, because you're learning things in confidence. The core of research ethics is actually these two things. There are a lot of things, the forms are very long, but the core piece is really here. Informed consent and confidentiality, meaning You cannot coerce or force someone into answering your questions. They have to be willing. You are taking their time for free. They have to be willing to continue to talk with you and answer your questions. And confidentiality means if they tell you things in confidence, you cannot talk about it to anybody else. And when you write about it in your research, anything that identifies them will be removed. So they are basically the simplest way I explain the need for ethics in our research is our research gives us jobs and it gives us papers and it gives us a way to teach our students, and maybe it helps the government if we share our policy results with them. But basically, most of the people we survey and interview, they don't actually benefit from the research that we do in any direct way. We are simply exploiting them. And therefore, we should do it with a lot of respect, fully confidential, fully with their consent, because this is actually a favor that they are doing for us. So we owe them that politeness, and we owe them that honesty, and we owe them not being pressured, because you don't pressure people who are doing a favor for you. That's just basic common sense. If they're doing a favor for you, then you have that conversation with them on their terms, not on ours.
And what about accountability? Accountability.
Pardon?
Accountable.
Are you asking what the meaning of that is?
In the research part, madam. In the research
in the result, you should be accountable to them. Is there a question there?
Madam, it's a question.
Are you asking me
What
how
type
to
of
be accountable, or what does it mean to be accountable?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
I see. Thank you for that. Okay. Being accountable means being as, that's a good question. Being as truthful and accurate as possible when you are reporting on that community or that group of people. Because you see, when they give you data and you analyze that data and you have your results and then you interpret the data in a paper, you have the power to tell their story. Is that not so?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
They are not able to tell their story. You are telling their story. And so being accountable means being as honest and as truthful and as generous as possible when we are telling their story that they have shared with us. That is what I mean by being accountable.
Yes, thank you, madam. Thank you.
Okay? And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to say goodbye on behalf of not just myself, but all of my friends and colleagues who did all of this work in Hubli Dharwad for 4 or 5 years, which is how we came to know Dr. Bilava here and how we came to know CMDR in the first place. Thank you very much.
One more question, madam.
Tell me.
Madam, one more question.
Yeah.
Madam, if we want to visit your California University, whether it is possible, madam?
If you want to visit us at Berkeley?
Yes, madam. No, research scholar, as a research scholar.
Yeah, it is possible, but it's a little bit complex. So, meaning there have to be people, you have to go with a group that is like advertising for a postdoc or advertising for a PDF or a research position. And then you can apply, and that's how we get our visitors, mainly.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
It's a little bit complicated though, because there has to be like an exact match with your experience and skills and what that person is looking for.
Yes, madam. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or anything else?
Participants, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Yes, no?
No, sir. Do you want my slides?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Please, madam.
You want the slides?
Yes, madam. Yes.
Okay, I
Yes,
will. I'll make them into a PDF and I'll send it to. So Dr. Hanagodimat, if I send it to you, you'll share it, right?
Uh,
If I send it to you, will you be able to share it
yes,
with
madam.
the?
Yes, madam. I'll share it to them, madam.
Okay. So I might do that tomorrow. It's a little bit late for me tonight, so I might do it tomorrow.
Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay.
Dr.
Okay.
Narana Bilwa is traveling, madam. That is why he is not
Yeah,
here.
he told me. He texted me. He and I are in good contact. He
Yes,
texted me. He's off to Mumbai, I know.
Yes, madam.
Yeah.
Yes, madam. I take
All
this
right.
yes, madam. I take this opportunity to thank from CMDR from my own behalf and behalf of participants, madam. It's late night to you, madam. It's
It's a little bit late for me now. Yeah.
madam. I think it's around 12 o'clock in California, madam.
It's about 11:30 at night. Yeah.
11:30, madam.
No worries. Don't worry. It was a pleasure. Yeah.
You have taken a wonderful class, madam. It's really.
Sorry?
It's a wonderful class, madam. It has helped a
Oh,
lot.
thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank
madam.
you. I appreciate that.
From